Hi, my name is Bongiwe Dlamini and I'm from Soweto. I'm currently studying my degree, Bachelor of Education degree.
My name is Samkelo Mukwena. I'm a second-year student in Bachelor of Arts with majors in Sociology and Psychology at the University of Johannesburg.
My name is Masaroka Chweni. I'm currently doing my final year at WITS, majoring in genetics and bioinformatics.
The last time I read the Bill of Rights was probably back in high school during life orientation. I just don't remember when it was.
The last time I read the Bill of Rights, I think it was 7 years back when I was in grade 10, 11, somewhere there. Yeah, that was the last time I read the Bill of Rights. I think we were doing LO.
Honestly, the last time I read the Bill of Rights was in high school. Yeah, ever since then, I never read it because I felt like I didn't have to. I was just reading it because I had to write a test or something. I do care about my rights. I feel like it is very important to consider the rights that you have so that no one can violate them.
Yes, I do care about my rights, but I do not think I care about all my rights. It's just those specific basic rights that I care about, that I am familiar and I know. So yeah, I don't think it's all of them.
I do, to some extent, I do, yes. I'm able to say, maybe in a store, I'm able to tell the cashier that you can't do me like that. So yeah, I don't know what they actually are. I just know what's considered moral principles of living.
So each and every year I partake in strikes at school. I'm part of the school council. So I partake in strikes, fighting for free education, free decolonized education, to ensure that no student is left behind and each and every student get an opportunity to register. So I believe that is practicing my right, not just my right only, but to assist other students who are in need, especially students coming from poor backgrounds, unprivileged backgrounds. So I believe when I partake in the strikes, that's part of practicing my rights, to fight against racism, tribalism, everything happening on campus that we face as students.
I've been at Home Affairs and we're like in a queue and then these white people just went through. And of course that got to me, so I needed to go up to the security to ask why was that the case. Yeah, even though whatever the response was a bit, I don't know, there was just nothing. They were not giving me anything. They just said that those people just went in, so they also know nothing about the situation. But of course, I felt like there was more to it. It was an act of racism in a way.
Well, I believe everyone practices their rights every day. In case of the scenario, when we were waiting for the shoot, we were talking about how the government is eating the money, and I got to express myself. That's freedom of expression. I got to say whatever that I felt like, and I got to share my opinion with the rest of my team.
So I'm going to touch on the one that speaks about equality. So there's a difference between equality and equity, and without equity, there's no equality. So when you're talking about equity, we're talking about giving the same resources to individuals, and then when you're talking about equity, we're talking about giving resources that will help the individual to succeed. So if there's no equity, then equality won't be there. So individuals should be given the resources that they need to succeed, not the same resources.
The part about food security, sitting where I am sitting right now, I feel like those people that we see on the street are as a result to that right not being accounted for in a way.
I would say the right to housing. There are so many people in South Africa who are homeless. There are so many people who are living on the streets, and it would be great for South Africa to practice that right more, so that people don't have to sleep on the streets in winter when it's raining. Yeah. Right now, I don't have anything in mind, but what I would say is the rights that we have now, South Africa needs to enforce them more. instead of implementing new, because right now I don't have anything in mind, but things like freedom of expression, right to housing, right to food, such rights needs to be enforced even more. Because if we are failing to enforce the ones that we are having now, then what's the point of implementing new?
I don't know if it's a right, but then I feel like people should be allowed to identify with whatever gender they prefer in a way, you know, and also they should not face difficulties that they're currently facing when it comes to changing their sexuality on the ID documents or them as a whole.
I believe that, going back to equality, I believe that we are not equal. As much as it's written in paper that everyone has a right to the right of equality, but we are not equal. I believe that men are not equal to women. Each and every day we're fighting against toxic masculinity, we're fighting against patriarchy and men abusing us. And I believe that the right of equality is just written in paper. However, it's not practiced. People are not practicing treating others in a right way. There's no equality. We're not treated the same way, especially those two, like the males and the females, the ones that I made the example with. Freedom of speech. Okay. So, freedom of speech. I believe South Africa, I don't know how, can I get a brief explanation of freedom of speech? Because I feel like it's a broad term and you understand it in like different ways. Is it freedom of speech, like I can talk about the president anyhow and I don't get arrested, whereas in other countries they do get arrested by talking about the president. So this concept of freedom of speech is a little bit tricky and I don't know.
I'm sitting here saying whatever I feel like saying, so I'm quite practicing my right to freedom of speech and at the same time not violating anyone or the law. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. Yeah.
Well, I get to express myself most of the times, but the truth is sometimes when you're around people that you're not used to, they don't take whatever that you're saying serious. So sometimes we feel like the freedom of speech that you have is violated in a way. Not everyone is going to listen to your opinion, or someone is going to clash the opinions that you have. So sometimes it is easy to express myself, but at times it gets very difficult.
I am aware of the right. I'm aware that no one can come to search my house or property without following the correct legal route for it.
Yes, I was aware. I think I had a little bit of an argument with one of my colleagues. We're talking about privacy. If I live at home, should I have privacy or not? If I have my own room at home inside my mom's house, is she allowed to open my room, or is she allowed to go through my stuff? Is she allowed to say no to this, or say, is she allowed to invade my privacy? So it's a question of, is the privacy limited, or what's so yeah, it's this thing of privacy is tricky, especially when you're living in the premises of your parents and under their guidance. Touching on the land, you're talking about expropriation of the land without compensation. So when you're looking at the land, so the thing of the authority should take the land and the privately owned land to ensure that it benefits the public. And I believe there are arguments around that, but I believe that will be beneficial if that would happen, because privately owned premises make a lot of money, and it will be beneficial for the public.
Do we care about the land? No, we don't.
No, I don't think young people care about that, because honestly, we are just living life. We don't even know why we need the land back. So I don't think young people care about that. Yes, I believe I have to be assisted at any hospital, regardless of how much I have. Because I have the right to health care. Why is it that I cannot be assisted at a private hospital? Why is it that specific people can be assisted at that hospital? So I believe all of us, since we have that right, not only rich people or people with medical aids have the right to health care, then all of us must have access to the private hospitals.
Yes, I believe I should be assisted in any private hospital, regardless of me having a medical aid or not, because I mean there shouldn't be discrimination as to you are rich or you are poor or you do not have money. So I mean I understand that the private hospitals have like better resources, and it's a question of why is it so? Why is the division? And talking about equality, one of the points of the section 9 of the Bill of Rights, it's saying that there's equality. So with such divisions, you question equality. Hence, I told you that. Hence, I was saying that the equality part is just written in paper. However, it's not practiced, because with that division, then we start to question the notion of equality in South Africa.
I do not think so. I don't. I mean, that person is a medical aid because he earns a specific amount of money and he therefore is able to afford it. So to say that everyone should have equal medical attention would not be of logic sense in a way. They pay for it. It doesn't come as a government service.
I believe if that happens, if the nurse says no, they'll be violating my right, because termination is legal. Hers is to do her job, not to tell me that I'm not supposed to do this and that. So they'll be violating my rights.
I'll be neutral. Reason being, I don't know her reasons behind her saying I shouldn't terminate my pregnancy. It can be because of health purposes. It can be if I terminate my pregnancy, I'll die. So I'll try to understand the reasons behind her saying do not terminate your pregnancy. If it's because of health, if it's because maybe I'll die if I terminate my pregnancy, then I have to understand the reasons behind. If it's because of she just doesn't want me to do it, then she's violating my rights. If it's because of the health reasons and she sits down with me and tries to make me understand why, and it makes sense, and it's because of health reasons, then I would understand. So it depends the reason behind her saying I shouldn't terminate my pregnancy. No, they haven't. Each and every year, fees are increasing, and students are being financially excluded. So we wouldn't be partaking and participating in strikes and fighting the institutions to allow students to register if the fields have fallen. So the reason behind the strikes happening is because fees are rising each and every year, and students do not have money, so fees have not fallen. Otherwise they're still increasing each and every year, and trust me, they do send us emails each and every year to say the fees, it's either at 5% from the last, they're just increasing each and every year, and students are struggling.
No, I don't think so. I don't. I mean, every time I'm scrolling on my social media platforms, I come across like posts of people asking other people that may be of help to them to please donate a specific amount of money so that they can get their degrees.
I don't believe that fees have fallen, because in 2015 students were saying fees must fall. Last year we were saying vets asina mali. So today there's still students who cannot register because they cannot afford to pay registration fees, they cannot afford to pay their fees, because where am I going to get a whole 100K to pay the fees? So the fees have not yet fallen.
Hi, my name is Tabeka Gwili and I am a part-time law student as well as have a bit of experience working with the Center for Human Rights at the Free State University. So today is Human Rights Day, and as we're celebrating human rights, we are also taking a look at the Bill of Rights and what this means to you. Now, before we look at the different rights contained in the Constitution Scheme Sum, there are two very important things that I would like us to take note of. The first thing is that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That is what is said in law. What this means is that there can be no law in South Africa that goes against the principles or the values contained in the Constitution. So what the Constitution says about your rights stands, and it will always stand. The second thing that's also important, Scheme Sum, is that the interpretation of these rights. Now, the first right that we're going to be looking at is Section 16 of the Constitution under the Bill of Rights, which basically says that you have the right to freedom of expression. Now, from this, you can already tell that you have the right to an opinion, you have the right to have ideas and to express your ideas in a creative way. But there are subsections in this section specifically that tell you, Uguti, there are things you can do, but there are things you are not allowed to do. So as much as you have the right to this opinion and you have the right to express yourself, subsections in subsection 2 says that you cannot, 1, entice violence or war, and 2, you cannot discriminate another person based on their gender, their race, or their ethnicity. So it basically means that you cannot discriminate a person based on their color of their skin. And this is according to the Constitution. So if you have had experience where you were discriminated or prejudiced because of the way you look, because of your skin, or because of your gender, then that means that your constitutional right has been violated. That is what Section 16 of the Constitution says, which protects your right to freedom of expression. Another right that we're going to look at, Scheme Sum, is under Section 27, and this basically says that you have the right to healthcare, food, water, and social security. This right basically says that you have the right to access these things and that the state needs to take reasonable measures to ensure that you have access to these. Now, this is why you can go to a public hospital and there are services that you are able to get whether or not you have medical aid. I have seen Scheme Sum asking the questions, Uguti, why can't I go to a private hospital and get the same services offered to me if I don't have a medical aid? Well, unfortunately, Scheme Sum, the Constitution says that you have the right to access these things as long as they are reasonably available to you. There's an interesting case I want us to look at very quickly, which dealt with this a bit. I learned this in law, and if you are a law student, then you would definitely know this case. This is called the Subramoni case. So in the Subramoni case, Mr. Subramoni wanted access to a very expensive machine to help him live because he was dying. Unfortunately, the hospital said that he cannot have access to this as there is a long list of people that also need to get treatment. So he sought to bring Section 27 into the play to say that, but my constitutional right says that I have the right to access this. Now, in this instance, the court had to now find out, first of all, does he really have access to this machine? And second of all, how does the state now make sure that he gets this access? At the end of the case, it was found that the state does have a responsibility to make sure that its citizens have access to necessary health care. But the only condition, Scheme Sum, is that it needs to be available. And in the Subramoni case, unfortunately, it found that he cannot have access to the expensive treatment because it is unavailable at the time that he needs it. Does this mean that his right was violated? because the Constitution says that he has the right to access to it. But the court now found that, unfortunately, because the access is limited, his right would now be limited or violated. That doesn't mean, Skim Sam, that Section 27 does not apply. In the contrary, it does. Every citizen has the right to healthcare, has the right to access food, has the right to access water, and has the right to social security. And the state, which is the government, has the responsibility to ensure that every citizen has access to this. Up next, we're going to be looking at Section 29 of the Constitution, which basically says that you have the right to education. Now, this section is twofold. There's the first part and then there's a second part. The first part basically says that you have the right to basic education, which also includes adult education. And then you also have the right to further education, which is your universities, your colleges, and the sort. The second part now of this section says that if you establish an institution, your institution can be established at your own expense, but it should not discriminate, nor should it have any sort of prejudice. Now, because ikhuluma nge-education, Skim Sam, you'll remember the protests, the Fees Must Fall protests, where students across the nation wanted to protest against the ever-increasing rates of university fees, college fees, basically the fees that they pay in order to get a further education. They now tried to bring into play this section to say that, but the Constitution says I have the right to education. Why am I being denied this right if I do not have the amount to pay for this education? I stand for this. I stood for it and I still do stand for it, Skim Sam. Now, remember what I mentioned about rights, that as much as you have a right, there's also a responsibility or a limitation to that right. This does not necessarily mean that your right is violated. It just means that unfortunately there are things that are going to prevent you from enjoying that right in its fullness. Now, for example, let's take the right to education into play. You have the right to basic education. You have the right to access further education. The Constitution says that the state needs to do all that it reasonably can to ensure that you have access to this education or to this further education. Unfortunately, Skim Sam, if there are limitations to this, then the Constitution cannot now force an institution to give you this education. The state needs to ensure that it takes measures to give you access to this education. But if there are limitations that prevent you from getting this education, then unfortunately, Skim Sam, that is one of those limitations that exists when your right needs to come into play. Now, a lot of people are saying that universities need to give education for free, or they shouldn't be charging so much. I don't work for a university, Skim Sam, but I think because of the expenses that come into bringing this education or giving this education, those expenses, as the Constitution even says, are expenses that the institution needs to cover. But for them to get back those expenses, they charge students for the education. What the state needs to do is it needs to make sure that its citizens who want education have access to this education when they need to. Now, when Skim Sam, do you think that education should be free? Considering what the Constitution says about your right to education, as well as those that want to establish institutions of education. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you think education should be free? You should actually read Section 29 about this and tell me your thoughts as well. Another interesting section that I want us to look at, Skim Sam, is Section 30 of the Constitution. This basically gives you the right to language and culture of your choice. Remember what we said about discrimination and prejudice? That it goes against your constitutional right and it violates those of others? So the same is true with this one. This section basically says you have the right to speak whatever language you want and to practice whatever culture you want. But once again, Skeem Sam, remember what we said about responsibilities and limitations? Just because now you have the right to speak in whatever language you want or to practice whatever culture you want does not mean now that you need to violate another person's right to also enjoy their right to the language that they want or to practice the culture that they want. At the end of the day, Skeem Sam, we constantly need to practice the spirit of Ubuntu. Just because I have that right does not mean now I have the authority to violate your right. Let's respect each other's rights. Respect another person's language. Respect their culture. And they also have a responsibility to respect your language and to respect your culture in return. This is according to Section 30 of the Constitution. Another section that we're going to be looking at is Section 10 of the Constitution, and this basically speaks on human dignity. Now, the section says that you have the right to inherent dignity and the right to have your dignity respected and protected. Now, the question then, Skeem Sam, comes into play that now that there's vaccines and vaccinate and there's places that require you to vaccinate, is there a law that forces you to vaccinate? Now, once again, I did mention, Skeem Sam, that this is just an opinion and this is not legal authority. But according to the Constitution, you have the right to your human dignity. Human dignity now basically says that your body, who you are, and what happens with you, it needs to be respected and it needs to be protected. So you can imagine, Skeem Sam, if you don't want something to happen to your body, a person cannot come and force you to have that thing done on your body. You, at the end of the day, have the right to say no. So Section 10 comes into play when we're even talking about vaccines as well. If there are places that require you to vaccinate, but the Constitution says that you have the right to your own bodily and human dignity, can you be forced to vaccinate if you don't want to? You can let me know your thoughts, Skeem Sam. But remember what the Constitution says. You have the right to say no. So can they force you to vaccinate? What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, read Section 10 of the Constitution and let me know what you think they mean by human dignity. Up next, we're going to be looking at Section 9 of the Constitution, and this basically deals with equality. Now, this section says in Benjam that everyone is equal before the law and everyone needs to be treated equally. Whether or not you are blue, you are orange, you are red, umthetho uthi, Skeem Sam, that everyone is equal before the law and they all have equal rights and deserve equal representation. Look at this section and tell me what you think it means by that.